welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have a very special guest, Charles Achampong. Charles is an executive in residence, a keynote speaker, and a best-selling author. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome Charles Achampong.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Courtney, for having me here today. I'm very excited to share a story and join your podcast. Thank you.
Charles, I am thrilled for this podcast episode because your book, I want to hold it up here. So it is Around the World in Family Days, What We Learned When We Left It All Behind and Traveled the Globe. This is like a dream for people. I cannot wait to walk our listeners through just how you did it, what sparked that idea. But first, let's go ahead and just start with a general introduction and background of yourself.
Sure. Yes. Thank you again for having me. And as you mentioned, I'm Charles Achampong. So I'm a speaker, I'm a writer, and someone who really used to live in constant motion, always sort of chasing the next milestone. And I've spent the last 20 or so years working in the public, private, not-for-profit, and philanthropic sectors, all driven by purpose, but eventually running on empty. And last year, as you're saying and alluding to earlier, my wife and I, we made a bold decision to hit pause and take our two daughters on a global sabbatical. We traveled over 8 countries and 4 different continents, not just for adventure, but to really slow down and really reconnect with one another. And the journey, of course, didn't give me all the answers. I didn't expect it to, but it gave me the space to be able to ask better questions and actually hear what those answers are. So from that came the heart of my book, Around the World in Family Days. And I didn't want to write a book that said, these are all the places that we visited or the food that we ate or the monuments that we checked out. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what's the big so what, right? It's like showing you pictures from our vacation and watching our eyes glaze over. So it's more of a travel memoir, which talks about the relationship that, how this trip changed myself, how it changed my relationship with my kids and my spouse, and really kind of stepping away from routine and rediscovering joy and really redefining what matters most to me. And really at its core, it's about the transformational power of pausing. And I'm now taken sort of focusing on teaching ambitious professionals how to build powerful pauses in their day so they can stop living on empty and start running sort of more fully in their lives, and focused on sharing that message on stages with a wide variety of audiences. So that's where really I'm focused on sharing some of those stories and talks from that perspective.
I cannot wait to get into this. So, Charles, we were just speaking before this podcast episode started recording, and you are so right. I feel like so many people could resonate with that idea of constantly like, go, go, go. What's next? What's next? And so your book, like you said, it's not just talking about these locations, it's talking about these lessons. And I love how after every chapter that you have in this book, you have like key takeaways, some like keywords, and those are the ones that we're going to get into. But
Great.
I would love to just start, like, what sparked that idea of traveling? Was it when in your childhood, or was it more like present day?
Yeah, honestly, I think my love of travel was ignited even before I knew how to pronounce the word, right? In many ways, my mom took me to Trinidad and Tobago, where I was just 9 months old, and apparently I returned back walking and surprised my dad. And so you could say that travel literally got me on my feet. And so growing up, travel was less about the fancy vacations, or it was more about obligation, right? We'd go to Ghana in West Africa, where my family was from, my grandparents on both sides, every 5 years to visit extended family. And I used to complain that why can't we go to Disneyland like everybody else, right? And my dad would say, Ghana is exactly like Disney, Charles, minus the rides and Mickey Mouse and the theme parks, right? Of course. So, but I mean, somewhere in those reluctant trips, something stuck, right? I learned that there's a magic in going where the crowds don't go, right? Which means that in many cases, the most meaningful journeys aren't convenient or glamorous, but they really shape how you see the world. And in many ways, they really shaped how I've seen myself as well.
That is wonderful. And you speak about so many just key words throughout the book, but this
Hmm.
idea of being able to just pause in life as you would go on this trip and really focus on that human connection with your wife, both daughters. So I know there was so many different things that you really could take away from this trip, but what were some like big concept, big ideas that maybe just, I don't know, like brought your family even more together, amongst your travel within these locations?
Yeah, I think the power of being together in many ways, we were two ships passing in the night, right? And I mean, we had a flurry of activity that was going on the home front. Everyone's kind of got their own work gets in the way, life, living, everyone's got their own sort of approach. But the fact that this trip really brought us together, it gave me an opportunity to get to know my daughters even better, get to know myself even more. It gave me an opportunity to be able to spend some time with my spouse and ask her questions about what her life has been like, where it's going, where we envision it going as well. It just allowed us to step out of our routine, the day-to-day bubble of going and moving forward. And so I think I enjoyed the fact that I got a chance to get to know my family even better. But I think what I enjoyed more was the time that I had with the one-on-one time I had with each of my daughters as well. And so in many ways over time we learned that we didn't always have to necessarily travel as a pack, and anytime we arrived at a new destination. But I enjoyed spending time with each daughter, or even when we were able to stay with family and friends, being able to spend some one-on-one time with my spouse as well, just to be able to have some, not necessarily having to be here in our own home environment and thinking about what we needed to do next, but just being able to have conversations that we could take in our surroundings and our environment. And I enjoyed the peace and tranquility of being able to just reflect and not be hamstrung by the day to day and the routine of life. And I think that for me was pure enjoyment. And that's where I really got a lot of sort of value from that experience.
That's so exciting. And, like even before this trip
Mm.
actually occurred in the book, you speak about, and I'm such a firm believer of that, but when you put something out into the universe,
Mm.
somehow, some way, things just start connecting.
Do they ever?
And I would love for you just to elaborate on maybe some people would love to do something like this,
Mm.
but perhaps like money may be a factor,
Mm.
or, oh, we have a house back at
Mm.
home and we have a mortgage.
Mm.
So how did that particular, should I say, situation with your house? I would love for you to go into detail with that. How things just aligned for to allow your family to travel like this.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm a firm believer in that as well. When you put something out there, things happen, or when you at least make a small, tangible action forward, things materialize and come into fruition. And so
Mhm.
we were really even reluctant about, first of all, renting out our house while we were gone. This was a big journey for us, and to spend several months away from home, the last thing I wanted to be worried about was how the house was while we were away. And so we kind of hemmed and hawed, and we had realized that there was a realtor around the corner from where we lived. And we'd mentioned it in passing several months prior to us actually leaving on our trip. And we said, we were interested, and we're looking at taking this, sort of life changing experience. And we wanted to know if there was an opportunity for us to rent out our home. What do you think the market would be like? Would there be an interest? And it's also because, we were gone for a finite period of time, just for under a month, or under a year rather. And so to be able to find someone who'd be there during that time period that you could trust to look after your belongings that we left behind was something that was also of importance to us, but also could have been a stressor as well for us. And so we put up a sign, for lease sign, a short-term lease sign for just under a year. And within 24 hours, we had someone knocking on the door, asking that they were interested in wanting to rent out our place. And I was like, oh, this will want to go. Are you in the neighborhood? And he was actually, it's a family that lives 5 or 6 hours down from us that just moved into the neighborhood, bought their place, and was looking to do a significant renovation during the exact period that we were doing our renovation. And so the fact that we had never met this family, because we know we felt essentially we've been in the neighborhood for quite some time, so you get to know all your neighbors and all the kids and the extended family. And the fact that the timing worked out so well and that they looked after our place so immaculately well was just so surreal. To be able to have someone who lives just down the street, who is not only able to look after their own sort of renovation to make sure things are on track, but to also look after our own home, it almost was a sign that we needed to say that, wow, the universe really not only is endorsing your opportunity to go on this trip, but they're also helping you and supporting you as well. And the added income allowed us to spend a bit more time than we envisioned in terms of our experience and our travels around the world. But it also gave us the safety and security of knowing that there was someone close to home who was going to be looking after our possessions here at home in Toronto. Yeah.
That is incredible because when I read that, I was like, this is so true. There's like signs, signals, synchronicity
Yes.
that really do happen because I've experienced that not in the sense of like traveling the world like with my husband,
Hmm.
but just in the idea that it's so true. When you start setting something in motion with good intent, with like intent to like help others or pull people together, there really is something to be said about how certain either people come into your life
Yes.
or you know what I mean? Or like events
Agreed.
that pop out of nowhere and you're like, how is this happening?
Exactly.
So I love that you mentioned that in the book. And, I think when people read this book, and we spoke about it too before, but I know it's already inspiring so many people just to like go for things that maybe they put like on the back burner, so to speak.
Mm.
So, what could you maybe tell those individuals, maybe those listeners right now, if
Yeah.
they just really want to take that jump to go travel, but if they're being like, they feel like they're being held back, how do you get the courage to move forward?
Yeah, I think what holds most people back is fear, plain and simple, right? Not just fear of the unknown, but fear of what they might lose, whether it be stability or status or income or identity. And of course, I get it. I mean, especially in the world that we live in now with economic uncertainty, rising costs, inflation, and so much noise telling us that we have to stay productive and keep climbing and keep grinding. Stepping away can feel irresponsible, right? Reckless, even. But I think for me, here's the thing, fear often disguises itself as logic. One of my favorite sort of motivational speakers is Les Brown. And he has this great line where he takes the word fear as an acronym and he says, fear stands for false evidence appearing real. Right. And that hit me because so many of the lessons that we tell ourselves or the reasons that we tell ourselves, that we can't do something. And they're built on, in many ways, on this assumption that they haven't even happened yet, but we envision that they're going to happen, right? We imagine everything falling apart, but we rarely ask the question, what if it doesn't, right? What if things turn out well? What if something is better waiting for you on the other side, right? And that's the thing. We often kind of deviate or sort of focus on the negative, right? Comfort zones, one of my favorite quotes is comfort zones are great places to visit, but terrible places to stay. And, for a long time, I think I lived there. Many of us lived there, right? And we had a very good life. We continue to have a very good life. Nothing was broken, but something felt incomplete, right? And eventually that discomfort of staying the same eventually outweighs your fear of change, right? And so what gave us the courage to go, honestly, it was my spouse. She was the one who spoke the dream aloud many, many years ago. And then over time, we built a plan. We didn't leap blindly, right? We were
Mhm.
thoughtful, we saved, we strategized, we organized. But at some point, you have to start planning. You have to actually start trusting and start doing. And I've realized that there's no perfect time, right? You can't wait for life to deliver for you the sort of ideal or perfect outcomes. You have to choose to make the moment you're in now perfect and move forward.
That's so true. And you were mentioning it, but when it came to the time frame for actually the idea being sparked, so to speak,
Yeah.
but then carrying it out, and then who exactly was involved? Was it just your wife? Did you include your daughters in the actual planning of where the locations you would actually visit?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so the first part came during our honeymoon in Brazil. We were at the top of Corcovado Mountain, so standing underneath the towering, kind of iconic Christ the Redeemer statue, soaking in the panoramic view of Rio de Janeiro. And it's one of those moments that makes you feel tiny, but also infinite at the same time, right? And as we were literally catching our breath, trying to get up to the top of the mountain, we saw this man who had an oxygen tank who was slowly and painstakingly making his way to the summit of the mountain, and you could see the determination in each step that he was taking. And I remember Janice and I both looking at him, and then we kind of said to each other, kind of quietly, like, wow, travel is a privilege. And that kind of hit us hard. And somewhere between that realization and over dinner later that evening, Janice turned to me and said with excitement, she says, you know what? I want to take our future family on a trip around the world. I kind of blinked and I'm like, sorry, what did you say? All right. I'm like, she said it again, but this time even more confidently. And no, so let me set the scene, right? We had just gotten married, we had just bought a house, we had just moved to a new city, we had just started a new jobs, like all these justs, right? And we hadn't even talked about kids yet, let alone how many. And here she is already planning this international family sabbatical. I'm like, I thought she had lost it. I mean, I was still trying to figure out how we were going to merge our bank accounts, let alone how we're planning this international sabbatical trip around the world, right? And I mean, in hindsight, we didn't leap into it. We kind of, maybe because of me, and we simmered on it, right? And eventually, that wild dream turned into this long-term plan, a 10-year, 12-year plan to be exact. And we started saving, simplifying our lifestyle, making
Mhm.
small and deliberate decisions until one day the dream doesn't feel wild anymore and it felt right. And, I think what really pushed us over the edge just wasn't the moment in Rio de Janeiro, but it was
Mhm.
that creeping sense that years later that we were kind of living well, but not, I don't know, not deeply, right? We weren't unhappy. Like I've said, we enjoyed our jobs. We loved our community. Our kids were healthy, but everything starts to blur, right? Your days start to feel productive, but not meaningful, right? We're constantly in motion, and
Mhm.
I feel like in many ways that we rarely moved, and so it was like we were living on autopilot in many ways, doing all the right things, and quietly wondering, I think, to ourselves individually, is this really it? Right? And that question doesn't typically go away, and you have to do something about it. And for us, that something was pressing pause on everything and seeing what might happen if we actually gave ourselves some time and space to live differently for a short period of time.
That's so true. Just
Mm.
the power of pausing. And,
Hmm.
I almost want to say how actually difficult that is, like present
Oh,
day, you know,
very
because
much so.
right? Because you think about this idea, like, we spoke about it, but just the constant go, go, go notifications are going off.
Yes.
You got to, like you said, like, what is next? Like, you never actually
Yes.
soak in and even reflect of maybe the lessons that have been learned or even
Yes.
the accomplishments and the achievements, like just for a split second to
Yes.
realize how far you have come. That's so important. I'm so glad you mentioned that, just like the power of pausing and
Hmm.
reflecting. And I have to, this is a quote from the book, but I just thought
Yeah.
it was so powerful. So our trip wasn't just 7 months of memories. It
Mm.
was over a decade of choosing patience
Mm.
over instant gratification.
Mm.
We weren't perfect. Heaven knows we had our share of missteps
Mm.
and second guessing, but that's the thing about big dreams.
Mm.
They don't require perfection, just persistence.
Mm.
So, could you elaborate on that?
Oh boy. It's amazing. Like stillness makes space for what's been trying to get your attention all along, right? In motion, you can drown out the whispers of fatigue, of disconnection, of dreams, maybe deferred in many ways. But in stillness, I feel like those whispers get louder, or they got louder, at least for us, right? And I discovered that, like anything else, pausing or having a presence is a muscle, right? That if you don't use enough, can weaken or atrophy, right? And so when I finally stopped racing around from one thing to the next, I started noticing things again, like my daughter's dry sense of humor that sneaks up with her clever one-liners every now and then, or the way that my spouse furrows her brow when she's worried and doesn't want to say anything or disturb, like those kind of things, right? I think I hadn't really truly noticed those things in a long time. Not because I didn't care, but because I was always halfway to the next thing, right? And so I don't think necessarily stillness solves all the problems in your life, but it helped me see them more clearly. And and I also think about the fact that it's hard. We live in a microwave society where we want everything instantly, right? Everything instantly. And so I look at my kids now too, when they're, everything is on demand with a click or, or anything, and they get these things instantly. So it's very difficult for us to think long term. Even 10, 12 years for us, it was, and so I look back on the 10, 12 years, and I don't ever feel that we had gone without. We adjusted our lifestyle to be one that we wanted to ensure that we had something to aim towards, a goal in mind, but we still went on trips and vacation. Maybe they weren't luxurious or kind of things that you would see on the front page of a magazine, but we were still able to find time for ourselves. We realized that there was a light at the end of the rainbow. We realized that there was a goal that we wanted to work towards and attaining as well. And we wanted this to be a lesson to our kids to say, hey, you know, they started asking more questions in terms of like, how did you guys do this? We had no idea this was going on. And so asking questions, say, hey, we set a goal for ourselves. This is the vision that we set for ourselves for down the road. And yes, there were things that deviated along the way. COVID happened, life circumstances happen. And it means you start to second guess whether or not it's something you can work towards. But I wanted them to learn the lesson of long-term planning and thinking, and not just waking up and saying that you want something and then being able to have it, but being able to work towards it, which is why I think we enjoyed the trip even more, knowing that it was something that we planned, we saved for, we strategized for, and we were able to make happen. But the universe also played its part, and luck also played its part as well. So I wanted it to be a lesson learned not only for others, but for my own family and my kids as well.
I think that's so special. And, just talking about that idea of instant gratification, but
Mm,
being able, I'm sure from a parent's point of view, to be able
mhm,
to instill that sense of almost like delayed gratification, but
mhm.
look at how much you could learn from different cultures, how much just inspiration there is out there when you save up and you appreciate it so much more. So
Yes.
I love that. The excellent lessons that are taught, I'm sure, like I said, for your daughters and for
Mhm,
your wife and yourself to witness
mhm.
them growing, like, on that trip from the start to the finish of
Yeah.
those like 7 months. Did you see any type of like personal growth in your daughters or anything that really stood out, maybe?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that, and to be honest, it's hard. I don't think I fully realized the impact of the trip we had until we came home.
Sure.
Because it's like all these things I'm talking about were all things that it's tough. It's only when for me at least, it's only when you step back and look at the experience in its entirety that you start to see what has shifted. I mean, there were definitely powerful moments along the way, like our time in Ghana, where my family is from, where, we had my immediate family, my parents, my siblings all under one roof, and just realizing how special that was and how unique it was for all of us because my siblings are all around the world. My parents travel significantly in their retirement, right? That type of togetherness, I feel like, especially as adults with our own family, is rare. So I think I really appreciated that. Or when we were in Johannesburg and the girls saw poverty at a scale that they've never witnessed before, right? And it sparked conversations that I could never have planned for. There was the lighter and equally more powerful moments as well when they're diving fearlessly into the Great Barrier Reef, right? And as if they've known those waters forever. And I think, for me, that wasn't one big realization,
Mhm.
but I think it's sort of a thousand small ones that started to settle in. Um, yeah, so I don't think there was this grand life epiphany that I realized on the mountaintop somewhere, but I think if anything, it was a deeper shift for me when I returned back from the trip. I realized that the old version of me that left the trip was fully prepared to come back and pick up from where I left off, but that life, that version of me didn't quite fit anymore in many ways, right? And to be honest, the world had moved on too. So, um, I think that shift is continuing to unfold. I think it's not complete as of yet. I'm still learning how to live differently, still asking better questions, still listening more closely. So I think those are the pieces I think I've seen. I've seen the maturity of my kids. I've seen the physical growth as well in my girls too. It's amazing. But I don't in the moment there, I there are those little moments that happen, but I really feel like when I return back and reflect, and even writing the book, very therapeutic. That's when I was kind of like, oh, I had all these aha moments and experiences that I was able to refer back to my journal and see like, oh, these are all the things that we learned along the way. But in the moment, it didn't really necessarily come to me until I returned back and realized that, okay, that was an amazing experience. And here are the things that I learned from that experience as well.
I think that's incredible. And, to know that you went on this trip and that when you would return, you would write a book, you'd become a best selling
Yeah.
author.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you are a keynote speaker.
Yes.
I mean, did that even cross your mind?
Oh,
Go ahead.
Courtney, this is the thing that makes it so. I get goose even as you say that. I get goosebumps as you say that because I had never envisioned. I had a life, a very great life, great career, continue to have a great career, but a phenomenal career that allowed me and took me all over the world. Um, meeting such dignitaries from around the world, speaking on stages representing the organizations that I worked and employed for, traveled everywhere. I had a great life. We had a comfortable lifestyle. And so I never envisioned writing a book. Never, it was never on my bucket list. Speaking on stages for me, for Charles Incorporated, never, that thought theme never really sort of escaped my mind. To me, this was just a cool experience that I'd be able to say, we did an amazing thing. We did a trip around the world. But when I came back, and I realized that my job was no longer available. And I started, okay, you go through the various motions, and of course, I realized I'd be naive in thinking that everything would remain the status quo. But as I started looking for new opportunities, I realized I'm like, there's more. I feel very grateful and very privileged to be in the position where I can take a step back and say, I don't necessarily need to jump into the next thing. Let me be reflective and use the time that I have now to think about what do I want to do. And I had so many people come up and ask questions about our experience that I'm like, there's so much great feedback, in terms of the perspectives and the updates I would share as part of our trip and journey that I realized I needed to give back or put it in a way that would document not only for my own, I guess, ego in a way, but also for sort of posterity, for my kids as well, in terms of a legacy. And I think the most surprising thing that came from this whole experience was the emotional response from people. I feel like our story gave other people permission to dream a little bit more, to pause, to think differently about their own lives. And I think a big part of it is that our family is not Instagram perfect, right? We're not this out of reach family that you can't get out to. We're ordinary. People know us. They've worked with us, they've gone to school with us, they've seen us in the grocery store. We do all the same things that everybody else does, right? And so I think when they see that we took the leap, not because we had it all figured out, but because we chose to prioritize a different kind of experience that society doesn't tend to sort of encourage, right? It made them go, wait a second, maybe we could do something different too. And I think that really surprised me. If anything, what really surprised me is not even that, but it was my own reaction to their reaction. I didn't expect someone could move people that way or to have them think differently that way, that I had the power or even the influence to be able to do that. And I didn't think I had that kind of voice, or that my words could ripple into someone else's or affect someone else that way as well. And I think I really underestimated the power of storytelling, right? And I think maybe in many ways I kind of underestimated myself to be able to at least carry that off as well. I didn't realize I was capable of writing something or standing on a stage and making someone feel seen or inspired or heard or maybe even just a little less stuck. And that's been the most humbling part of all of this for me. The fact that our story, I guess, told honestly, has the power to open up something in someone else. I think that's the biggest piece for me that has really sort of shocked and impacted me.
I think that's so inspirational because, like I said, this book, just the idea of traveling, whether it is internationally or domestically,
Mhm.
but to really help people kind of veer away from the societal norms that, you
Hmm.
know what I mean?
Hmm.
When you graduate with certain degrees, that you have to go into certain areas
Yes.
or
Yes.
industries, but that you could open up your mind to so many different avenues, or if it is traveling, how it could open up your mind. And like you had mentioned, I just wanted to ask you more
Hmm.
specifically, but when you returned, you mentioned that you kind of prepared yourself that maybe things were not going to be the same career-wise. But
Yes.
how did you maybe overcome that and to be able to kind of just go with the flow of understanding, okay, maybe my position's not here anymore, but not getting anxious? Because I feel like for those like coming back, it'd be
Of
like so
course.
exciting to go, but then you're like, oh
Hmm.
my gosh, like I want to put the brakes on before I come back.
Yes.
So
Yes.
could you maybe elaborate on that?
Sure. Sure. So there, I mean, there's the art and the science. So the science is that because we had 10 to 12 years to plan this trip, we planned for the worst case scenario. So, what if we come back and neither of us have jobs to come back to? What does that look like? How long will it take for us to look for jobs? How much do we need to set aside in order to cover our expenses? Because we knew that once we pulled the trigger and told our employers that we were leaving, all bets are off in terms of what happens next. And so we planned for the worst case scenario. And so we made sure that we saved enough for the worst case scenario. And it meant that we had to wait a little bit longer before we decided to pursue this opportunity of going on a trip around the world. So that would be the science of it. And I think the art is your ego. One of the things I've realized in life is one of my coaches, life sort of professional development coaches, have sort of mentioned to me around the ego. He'd always go on and say that his ego is not his amigo, and I love that. He goes, "My ego is not my amigo. You need to separate your ego from yourself. It's not your friend. It's always looking to propel you, make you feel better than other people. Like it's always sort of surmounts that whole feeling." And for me, because we had a bit of a safety cushion, security blanket ish in terms of coming back and me not returning to work, it gave me an opportunity to be able to say, like, what do I really want to do? What is that still small voice in me asking me to do? When I go for these long walks, when I write down, when I journal, when I think, like, what is it that I really want to do? And it's hard because you're so used to the knee jerk reaction of, I need to go back to work, or I need to go back to the formal 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, et cetera, et cetera. It's not that I want to be a contributing member of society. I want to be able to move things forward, but I have too much of an experience that we just went through that I would be doing a disservice to myself and to others if I didn't share that narrative with others in terms of that experience. And so writing the book was one thing, but then I wanted to use that platform to be able to use the book to be able to talk about the power of pausing and letting people know that yes, even though we went on a trip around the world, you don't need a passport to pause. You can find micro pauses in the everyday, and making sure that that is something that resonates with burnout as high as it is, with people going through various experiences. Just letting people know that, hey, take a few seconds for yourself. You don't need to go to Bali to go on this, this experience of a retreat. You can find things in the everyday, and I think it's just normalizing it and democratizing it and socializing it so that people can realize that you can find breaks in the everyday. And I think that message, it resonates with people. So I'm grateful that my wife's now returned back to work, but it's also given me an opportunity to explore this idea of the power of pausing, and even the idea of travel, and the fact that travel for us helped to improve our failure immunity. This idea of making us immune, not necessarily to failure, but immune to the feeling that failure has on us. And taking all those themes and experiences and relating it to and sharing it with people. So I think for me, it was the fact that I had the time to reflect and listen in and just get quiet. And it didn't come to me in hours or days or weeks. It took months to kind of unpack and really think about what is it that brings me joy and fulfills me and fills my cup. And I think when I got those answers over time from speaking to people, from writing things down, from reading, listening to podcasts, I think these are the pieces that came to me. Yeah.
That's so true. Like when you speak about just even the idea, because I really do, I think people could
Mm-hmm.
resonate with career and life lessons, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But on page 213, you speak about just, I'm going to pull out some key words, but finding joy and small moments, human connection,
Mm-hmm.
the value of
Mm,
presence. Charles,
mm,
I have been on that recently,
mm,
being present and how important that is. Recently, we were talking about this too before,
mhm,
but I recently had the chance to go visit my grandmother up in
mhm,
Pennsylvania. And there was something about it of really focusing on being present, of,
mhm,
removing the phone and just being present. I feel today more so than ever, everybody could kind of
mm.
relate to that, where
Definitely.
you really do. You have to be cognizant and how those moments are so special. So, could you maybe talk about just some of those human
Yes.
connections, small moments, and just value of presence?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we have to give ourselves grace. We are very, very difficult, very tough, very demanding on ourselves, and we expect a lot of ourselves. And I think the big thing is to give ourselves grace, particularly when you have everyone flowing in one direction and you're trying to flow upstream. It's difficult. It's challenging. It's demanding. It's it can feel near impossible. So I think it's important for us to one give ourselves a bit of grace. I think the second thing, one of the questions I often ask as part of getting on stage and speaking to people is that we talk about. I inevitably ask everyone to, have you gone through a morning routine? Have you brushed your teeth, done your hair, your makeup, showered, et cetera, et cetera? Everyone puts up their hand. So we all tend to focus a lot on our outer presence. And then when I ask the question, the follow-up corollary question in terms of how many of you focus on your inner person, your inner being? Do you pray or meditate or journal or get quiet? Maybe one or two people out of a room of 100 or 150 people put up their hand, right? And if anything, that is just a great reminder that we all focus on the facade, on our or sort of our outer presence. We never focus and spend time on our inner person to check in to say, hey, how are you doing? Right? We've put on the facade in terms of how we look to the world, but we never ever spend time on ourselves. And I think I fell prey to that. From the outside, and I felt good, but on the inside, I was kind of like, I don't spend any time thinking like, how am I doing? What's going through my mind? And I think one of the things for me is when I look at my parents or my kids, and I realize how much they've grown or gotten, matured, or my parents getting older. I just realized my time goes by so quickly. I mean, we all say that, but it's at these moments where if you're grateful, you have these moments of reflection, or your birthdays, anniversaries, moments of occasion where you get to celebrate these things, and for me, I just stop and look. And I think I've just realized as I've gotten older that lens of invincibility, that I begin to think a bit more of my own mortality, more so than I have in the past, partly because of the fact that I see that my family members and parents are aging, and realizing that, as things come to pass, the circle of life, nothing lasts forever. And so I've just realized for me that if I'm going to enjoy and soak up as much of the moment as possible, I'm going to just sit and stare and soak it in. There are moments when my kids look like, Daddy, why are you just staring at us? You look kind of, I'm just looking at them thinking, like, boy, I remember when they were so small, and, I was always wishing for the next stage. I can't wait till they get out of the diapers, or I can't wait till they talk. I can't wait till they this or school. And then you realize, you start looking back, like, oh, I miss when they were like that. There was never ever a perfect occasion, because when they talk, then you realize, like, oh, then they can actually talk back and reason. You don't want that, or do you want that? Having to defend that, right? Or that sense of independence that they have now. Oh, they're not as dependent on you anymore. Would you miss that sort of connection there? So all those things. And, I see that my parents, I remember my parents as being a certain way, my dad being active and all that. But now with as he's gotten older, his mobility and all these things, right? So I'm just trying to just take a deep breath, Charles, and just enjoy the moment, because this all too, will come to pass, and things will move on. And I'm much more present, realizing, okay, let me give that person a hug a bit tighter. Let me check in on a friend of mine that I haven't spoken to in a long time. And I'm now not as, there's a certain perspective as being a male that you can't show emotion. Things have gotten a bit better, but depending on, your group of friends or who they are, I'm much more my EQ has gotten much stronger over time. I'm much more like, how are things going? Like, how are things with the kids in the life? And try to take a bit more of a personal interest, as opposed to just the cursory surface level conversations that I've had. And I just find that I'm able to establish much more robust or intentional or much more engaging conversations as well. And I'm more present now because I've learned to say no to many more things that come my way. And I don't try and chase all the squirrels like I used to in the past. It's hard because I'm someone who people pleaser. I want people to be happy with me and things are going well. But now I'm like, if it doesn't fit, it doesn't work. I say no more often now because I want to have space for the things I want to say yes to, which is a hard thing to do, but you realize that over time, those things that bring you joy are the things you want to say yes to. And I'm living for myself as opposed to other people. So, kind of a long-winded answer, but yeah, yeah.
No, that there's so many things I want to pick apart with that.
Sure,
So,
yes.
the idea, like you said, of really spending time on focusing about like just even a conversation, a meaningful
Mm,
conversation, not just that transactional. I have been talking about this
hmm
even just in everyday life, like going to the grocery store.
Exactly.
And I mean, the people who literally check us out, but, did you find everything?
Yes.
But more so, like I always talk about just asking one more question.
Oh,
Do you know
beautiful.
because in my experience of doing that actively, like I really do have to think about stuff because you're right. We're always in a rush
Yes.
and we're always on to the next thing. But to be able to be present in that moment, to speak to another human being and
Yes.
ask them, how was your day? What are you doing this weekend?
Yes.
But I think
Yes.
it's so important what you just said, just about allowing ourselves to have more meaningful conversation, whether it is family, friends, or just out, like I said, in an ordinary day, getting some
Yes.
chores done, errands ran. But I love how you mentioned that because it is, I think today it's probably harder more so than ever
Oh,
that, okay, I got to go to the grocery store. I got to go make this
exactly.
stuff.
Exactly. Exactly.
Making it enjoyable. And speaking
Yes.
of like enjoyable and maybe having even a different perspective,
Mm,
this trip, did it shift your perspective in a
mm,
way where you view success in a
hmm.
different light?
Hmm. That's a great question. I think it definitely did. That, and I want to go back to what you mentioned earlier as well, Courtney, that point around being able to ask one more question. I love that
Yeah.
because I think in many ways, asking the one more question and then actually hearing what that person is saying and then remembering that and being able to use it in a future conversation. Hey, you went to so and so on the weekend. You said you were doing this or that on the weekend. How did that go? And I find that people, to be able to take it another step further, I have a terrible memory when it comes to stuff like that, but I find that the joy that person has, the conversation, the smile that they bring to the table. I love that. I used to think of the example of the dry cleaner that's just down the street from us, and I've gotten to know her and her family and all the things that go on, and it's not even the level of service I receive from her because I'm like, that doesn't matter to me, but it's the joy I see that she's seen as someone who matters more than just becoming the person who owns the laundromat or the clerk who's doing this or clean your clothes like that stuff. I'm like, oh yes, you matter more than just the transactional conversation we're having. You matter more because you're an individual, you're a person, you are someone I want to make sure that you see and get noticed and know that you're an important component of my day-to-day life, right? And so I think that for me is very important on your piece around sort of life and success. Yeah, I think for me, it's we touched on this earlier, but it's the fact that hmm, like the trip didn't change how I saw the world. It more changed how I saw myself in it and the role that I play and what more I can do. Right. In many ways, I never thought of those big questions for myself. My job was to. There's more to life than just getting up, going to work, paying your bills, and dying. Like I like that to me. I just feel that now I have a message that I think I need that resonates with people. And it's important for me to be able to share that with as many people as possible. The impact that this experience had for me, and that you don't need to have the same sort of experience. Although, if you are, I'm happy to share with you our playbook and how we did that. But there are things that you can pursue from that perspective. For me, so the success was based on everything that we talked about before, right? The income, the stability. Now I'm more focused on impact. And so someone's like, well, how can you pay the bills with impact? I'm like, you know what? If I focus on impact, the income will come. So I'm not and again, I see that from a place of privilege, and I'm fully aware of that. But I think for me, it's not about I used to get more excited. I'm like, okay, when I get the next promotion, or when we get the next house, when we get that vehicle, or what, it's always, oh, it's the next material thing. But I realized that joy was fleetingly, it passed by so quickly. And, even though we know that inherently, it's amazing that we still think that, no, we need to get a bigger, better, faster thing, and that'll still bring us that joy. But now I just realized that it's incumbent on me to find the joy in everything. When I get up in the morning, I decide to be happy. I decide to be joyful. I'm not going to let the outside world dictate or the weather dictate whether I'm going to find joy or happy in my own life. I need to get up and realize that, Charles, before your feet hit the ground, before you begin your morning routine, I'm going to be happy. I choose to be happy. I expect good things to happen to me. Right. And so if I go with that attitude, at least start off with the intention of that attitude. I listen to positive things in the morning. I spend time outdoors in the morning. All these things that I find that just reinforces much more positivity and more joy in my life. Because if I don't do that and I let the world kind of dictate how I should feel and me, like, then why? Why should I give that control over to other outside forces when I should be in control of my own happiness and my own joy from that perspective?
That is so true, Charles. I was literally
Mm.
nodding the whole time. So when
Hmm.
you talk about how happiness is a choice, I
Yes.
talk all the time about literally it's identical how positivity is a choice. We
Yes.
wake up every morning and I always talk just to be realistic, how
Yes.
some days our day starts off and maybe it's not on the great,
Of
the right
course.
foot.
Of course.
But how I really do, I focus on changing my perspective to
Yes.
become more positive throughout the day because we got a whole day. At
Yes.
least to me, I view that as a gift to be able to, I don't,
Yes.
like go out into the world and help others. And why would I want to sit here kind of that woe me if my morning
Yes.
didn't start off right? But I firmly, hands down, believe positivity is a choice, happiness is a choice.
Yes.
And it really does. It comes from within.
Exactly.
And I really am so happy that you said that. And
Oh,
there's I'm so excited to ask you this, Charles,
yes.
to kind of shift gears a little bit, but
Yes.
to go back, in your book, you have chapters of these locations that you and your
Hmm.
family go in. And I love how you pull out just like positive things from
Mm.
each location.
Mm.
Maybe it was your family experiencing, or maybe it was you reflecting on how
Hmm.
special that place was.
Hmm.
Uh, you had a very interesting slash comical almost
Yes. Many.
situation that happened in the South. I believe it was a South Africa
Yes, that's
pharmacy.
right.
So, Charles, please take it away.
Yes, 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 the shaving cream incident. So it's still one of the most unexpected, hilarious moments of the trip. I mean, there are many, but that one stands out, right? So about 20 years ago, I did a bit of work in the entertainment world, some commercials, some stock photography, an odd modeling gig here or there. It was a fun chapter in my life, but nothing I kind of really held on to. I moved on. Life happens, and you kind of let it go. So fast forward to South Africa, right? We're traveling the Garden Route, which is this beautiful stretch of coastline along the Indian and Atlantic coast of South Africa. And we stop in at a pharmacy to grab a few things. And I wandered into the male grooming aisle, probably, I don't know, half thinking about whether I really needed shaving cream at all. And then I saw it, right? My face on a box of aftershave cream, right? And I just froze. I kind of blinked, I stared, and then I burst out laughing, like loudly, like echoes down the aisle, kind of laughing, right? And everyone turned. A man nearby looked at the box, then looked at me, then looked back at the box, and he's squinting. He goes, "Are you famous or something?" And at that point, the whole aisle is like turning into this comedy scene. Janice, my spouse, came around the corner and just kind of shook her head, saying, like, "Of course, this would happen to you, right?" And so it was one of those surreal travel moments that you couldn't script if you tried, right? And what I love about it is that travel creates this, like, these strange little collisions, right? Between your past and your present. And I never expected this dusty old box of and a pharmacy halfway around the world would remind me of this version of myself that I'd completely forgotten. And honestly, it just reminded me that sometimes life doesn't ask you to not only look forward, it reminds you to say, hey, remember, this used to be part of your life too. So it was such a funny experience. And of course, I bought like 15 to 20 different boxes, which they're upstairs in our linen closet and all that. And so even though despite my name, my face was on the product, I still had to pay full price for it, which was a bit of a disappointment. But hey, I mean, it's a claim to fame and something I still chuckle and laugh at. So yeah, small world of all the things.
That is incredible. And I have to ask you, speaking about reflection. So
Yes.
here you are, you literally you see your face on the shaving cream bottle, right? What do you believe, like Charles 20 years ago to Charles now?
Yeah.
What has maybe changed that as you do reflect, you're most proud of, or
Oh
it
boy.
really stands out of being positive?
You know, I think it's more. That's a great question. Hmm. I think it's just more the self awareness. I'm much more clear now than I was 20 years ago about the things that bring me joy, the things that make me happy, what I want in my life, the things that I'm grateful for. Being able to pause and to reflect, to be able to journal, to look after myself, to ask questions of myself and actually hear the answers. I never was as, to sum all that up, I would never be as introspective then as I am now. Because 20 years ago, I had my whole life ahead of me, and I still do, but I had more time ahead of me. And so I thought, the world is my playground, and it still is, but I had this sense of cockiness and invincibility. And now, I don't know, maybe having kids, getting older, all those things, I have a bit more of respect for my life and what I can do. And I don't think I had that level of respect or that level of reflection 20 years ago. I was more focused on let's go to the next thing, next thing, next thing, next thing. Now I'm kind of like, I want more in my life and I expect more out of my life. But I'm much more reflective than I was 20 years ago. Yeah. And I think I would go back and tell myself that, hey, take more calculated risks. Everything is going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay.
I
Mm.
was just going to say that. Like, if I
Mm.
could look back and tell my 20-year-old self
Yes.
something, I would definitely say it all works out. If
Yes.
it's,
Yes.
you're meant to, you feel like you're called to go in a certain direction, and say it doesn't work out in the way you thought, but
Yes.
what are the lessons that you
Yes.
learned?
Yes.
And when you look at life, like you said, just with that spark of curiosity, of
Mhm.
really going for things.
Mhm.
I've been speaking about this, about when you fast forward in life and, like, say you really want to do something, but you're nervous to even start it, or you have like a little
Mhm.
bit of self doubt. But how are you going to feel? Just say even like 5 years down the road.
Yes.
But when you reflect and being able to take that jump or to take that leap,
Yes.
because it's really, I think the older that I get, I just don't want to live with that regret of what
Exactly.
if,
Exactly.
Charles.
Exactly.
Um,
Bang on.
but that's such an interesting thing, just really focusing on reflection, and how, like,
Mhm.
just like you said, just being like curious about things and asking more questions, being more
Exactly.
aware.
Exactly.
So
Taking more chances, being inquisitive, curious, as you're saying, and just trying things. And you said if they fail, what is the lesson learned? Like failure is feedback. It's a gift. It's data. How can you use that to take that next step, right? And that for me has been game changer. Like again, I would never have ever pursued writing a book, talking on stages, putting myself out there. It's a huge shift 180 degrees from what I've been doing now. But I don't know what the future is going to hold. But I know that if I decided to return back to what my life was in the past, I would regret not even trying or exploring this avenue to the fullest extent, so that at least I know that I've put myself out there. I've taken the chance. I'd regret not exploring it in more detail. Yeah.
this is, like I said before, this is really an inspirational book, even at a larger picture, not just the traveling aspect,
Mm,
but
thank you.
the concept of being able to inspire people to go for their loftiest goals or their,
Hmm.
biggest dreams, because you're right. Like you were speaking about it in this conversation about how time really flies by.
Oh, does it
And
ever?
I think it's just about living life to the fullest,
Hmm.
and all the memories that you speak about in this book, the memories that will forever be with your family.
Hmm.
And I mean, just being able to visit locations, appreciate the culture that's there,
Yes,
the backgrounds of people and where they come from. And sometimes to even reflect about, wow, this, like you said, like traveling is a privilege,
it
being
is.
able to travel the world. I think it's beautiful. And I'm so happy that when you did return, you ended up writing this book, because like you said, like what a reflection about where your kids are going to be able to always have this book, and
Yes,
to be able to reflect back of, I remember when we were there. I remember when my sister
exactly.
did this.
Exactly.
I think that's so beautiful, Charles. And as we round out this podcast episode, I would love for you to speak about maybe just a positive message or a
Mm.
positive quote to leave our community with.
I love that question. I think the big thing for me that I want people to take away is start where you are, right? Use what you have and just give yourself permission to begin again and again and again, right? We always have this impression that you have to have something in order for you to move on. Start with what you have and start with where you are and build on that. Give yourself permission to begin, to fail, to explore, to ask questions. That's sort of what I've kind of lived my life by, especially ever since returning from this trip. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And thank you so much, Charles. Just all the wisdom that you have provided our listeners
Thank
about
you,
what
Courtney.
really about what this trip has provided you, as far as even the lessons, being able to reflect, being able to really highlight what I consider certainly important concepts today: human connection, being present, the value of pausing. That's what I'm going
Mm,
to take from this, Charles, because it's so true. We're always so quick to get to the next,
yes.
chapter, or what's next in our career. To
Yes.
really just pause, think about maybe how far you've come
Yes.
and where you would like for that next chapter to go, before you
Exactly.
just, yes, like you said, like saying yes to everything, but actually saying no to some things.
Correct. Being
And
intentional. Yes. Yes.
so,
Yes.
Charles, it has been an absolute pleasure. And I cannot wait for maybe, I don't know, part two of this. I was so excited to have you on, because this is
Thank you,
a
Courtney.
unique podcast episode. So, Charles, I
Thank
wish
you.
you the best.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine. This has been such a joyful and fun and positive experience. So thank you for the opportunity to share my story and my family story and our overall experience too. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.